Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, along here with my co-host.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Bonnie Snyder, your co-host.
Yay. We want to thank, of course, right off the bat, WeBeam TV, Rob and John, for taking care of us here and allowing us to bring this program to you guys. And also, we had mentioned the last couple months, Greg Schindler's State Farm Office had been doing a fundraiser for us. And this past weekend, Robin Kiltz came by and dropped off a check at the foundation.
Oh, sweet.
I think, do you have a picture of that, Rob? Robin in front of the foundation office. Yes, they raised $150 towards our programming.
Nice.
So that was real nice.
And we're always grateful for our community partners.
Yes. Which we have several of them, Gulfside Custom T-shirts for our custom T-shirts. There it is, Robin dropping off the check on Saturday. That was really nice and appreciative. And she purchased a T-shirt at the same time, so that was really cool. So anyways, this month we had started out, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, but it is also
Military Appreciation.
National Military Appreciation Month. So we have a special guest here today that I think you should introduce.
Well, I thank you for that. As you know, throughout the year, each month there is awareness shown on a specific subject or topic. As Tammy said, this month, not only is Mental Health Awareness Month, but is also Military Appreciation Month. And so our special guest that we have on today is Ellsworth Tony Williams, who is the founder and CEO of Vets Counseling Veterans. I met Tony in another community event, and I said, hey, I'm a vet. I want to link up with you. And the first time we were on a phone conversation with each other, you'd have thought that we've known each other for decades, because it ended up being, Tony, a 4-hour conversation, I think. It was like 2 to 4 hours. I was on the phone with Tony, just, chit-chatting about just stuff in general, but you would have thought that we were friends that had known each other forever. And so I'm really, really honored that he agreed to come on and do the show with us today. Tony is a vet. And so I thought it was only fitting to have a veteran come on, that's able to address, not only mental health, as a CEO from a mental health organization, but also someone who is a vet. So, Tony, welcome to the show again. We so appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Bonnie.
All right, so Tony, if we can start out, please. As we know, you're a veteran. You're also a military brat, I think is what the common term is. But if you could, Tony, could you give our viewers an overview of who you are, your career in the military, and then talk to us a little bit about what exactly is Vets Counseling Vets.
Right. So yeah, and I think the knowing about where I came from would be to kind of explain why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. I'm a child of a military combat veteran, and so I grew up in the military, where literally, most people who are military brats, you can tell they're military brats because they'll tell you they're born in Fort something. So I was born in Fort Hood. And because of that, I went from to being a dependent of the military to actually joining the military at the age of 17. Actually, I dropped out of high school and joined the military because I just couldn't adjust to the culture that I was going to be introduced to once my dad left the service. Because I spent my whole life as a kid in the military environment, which is a totally different environment in the outside of that. So I joined the military at 17, and during that time frame, which is one thing I love about the military, but the first thing that my first sergeant said to me when I got my first duty assignment is, "You're going to get your GED." And that's how the military is, right? They take care of you and they motivate you. So because of that, getting that GED, I was then able to get a 3-year ROTC, active duty ROTC scholarship, which is also unique because normally the military only offers like 50 of them for the whole military. And I got that. And that was a journey I took from, I went to Temple University and I got commissioned in 1989. And my first introduction as a commissioned officer was the Desert Storm. So fast forward, I did 24 years. and in the military, and then I finally got out, and that's one of the transition part, right? Because when you're in the military for 24 years, I was 24 years in the Army, 8 years enlisted up to E6, and then 16 commissioned and I retired as an 04, which is a major. So when I got out, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do and be. Fortunately, my wife was in the domestic violence field, and they had a program where civilians could actually reach out and contact the domestic violence survivors. That was my pathway to be mental health, because when I went to the responders, I was told I couldn't say anything. All you can do is tell them phone numbers. And I asked, well, when can I say something? And they said you have to get a degree in counseling. So that's how I branched off to the counseling world. Today. And because of that, in my DNA, and literally in my DNA, it's taking care of veterans and their families. Veterans and their families, not just veterans, but veterans and their families. And the best way that I could do that, I thought, was veterans counseling veterans. And I just a story of how I got the name Veterans Counseling Veterans. I interned at James A. Haley over here, and of the 23 counselors, only like 2 of them were veterans. And so when a veteran would call, oftentimes a veteran has a salty language, right? And for some people, they were offended by the salty language. But to me, it was just like another word. It's just talking. And so in a matter of 5 minutes, we're like buds. So I said, why can't veterans counsel veterans? Why does the media always portray us as being broken? There are a lot of us out there who are not broken, and we can still be our brothers and sisters, helpers. And so that's why that's where the term Veterans Counseling Veterans came. And it's not just veterans who are part of my organization. It's loosely, knitted. It's not formal, but it's also spouses of veterans. So I got a Facebook group that consists of almost 600 veterans and spouses of veterans who are in the mental health profession. So that's kind of how that's Veterans Counseling Veterans.
And it is a wonderful organization. And I mean, I'm proud to say I'm part of that Facebook group. Like I said, when I met Tony, well, wait a minute, you're a mental health professional. Do you know about, my organization? And I said, well, no, I didn't. He told me about it, and, I looked it up, and, I'm proud to be a part of that group. So Tony, our show, this show started as a vision, of Tammy's after, she lost her husband, Bobby, to suicide 5 years ago. And she and I partnered about 2-3 years ago at one of my coalition meetings. And I reached out to her, and it was after the suicide death of my grandson. And then, as 6 months later, the overdose death of my son. And so a lot of our show focuses on, suicide and suicide loss, and how that affects different populations. Could you share with us from your perspective, because, veterans are affected by suicide as well. So can you talk to us a little bit from your perspective, about how, mental health and suicide, affects, those of us who are veterans?
Yeah, first of all, sorry for your loss, both you, Tammy and Bonni. But at one point when I was when I was in the interning at the VA, I was just doing suicide prevention. And then what happened almost like 5 years ago, I was invited to a Carol Razor, whose son died by suicide. He's a Marine. And I went to the funeral, and when you go to a veteran's funeral, you see all of us there in uniform, whatever. And I was in uniform. And I was so taken back that I did something you got to be careful when you do, right? I said, God, what can I do? I was in such pain and grief of seeing this veteran who I didn't know, but in person, but the values made us close. I said, God, what can I do? And he says, form a program. And I did. So I created a program called Veterans Families Outreach Support for Suicide Survivors. And the Carol, who was the mother at the time, who never met me before, she agreed to be part of this program, where we create because that's something that if you look at most of the VA and stuff, they're more for when the veteran's alive, and they kind of disappear when the veteran dies, passes away, and they're not, and the family's just they're devastated. Even in the military world, when you're in the military world and the sponsor dies, you got like 3 or 4 months, and if you live on base, you're off the base. You're like exiled. So it is a devastating event for a family. And so I thought it was important that it's a part of suicide prevention, because if you're public about it, it will eliminate that thought that a lot of veterans have, that if I'm gone, everybody will be better off, right? In their mind, they feel like if I'm not here being a problem, then everybody will have a better life. And so with me constantly putting out in front these mothers, and right now it's mothers, but mothers and fathers, like there's one like Craig and Tony Gross, these both involved as well. When they see this, it makes them pause, right? When they see, like I'm gonna have an event, as you know, Bonnie, in a couple of weeks where I have families there. I'm the only one that does this that I know in the country, where I have a complete ceremony, because during Memorial Day, which with the families of veterans are invited, and it's all about them. You give them a safe space. So if you see this and you're a veteran, and you see how these mothers tell their story and how broken out they are, it will make you pause. So it's an intervention, but you got to see it first, or it just goes nowhere. So that's where, in this event I'm doing in a couple of weeks, I'm going to broadcast it on Facebook Live and on LinkedIn, because I want more people to see this, and more veterans who are thinking about suicide, thinking that their life, if they leave, their life will make everybody better, to say, no, it doesn't. No, you've made it worse. And that's the thing where I do. And what's important, because in this program, I make sure that the survivors are the one that leads the program, because again, just like a lot of things, there's a point of being sympathy, and there's a point of empathy. And I think it's important that when a survivor is as the team lead, that they bring that empathy to the families. I've been there. I know what you're going through, and that kind of stuff. And they're mostly civilians, which, I don't talk civilian too much. I'm not real good at civilian talk. So they also that's part of the message as well. They can sit there and communicate to that civilian who lost that veteran to suicide.
That's exactly how we got started. But on the civilian side, yeah, everything is geared towards prevention, and there was nothing for those lost survivors. That's exactly true. And one thing too, Tony, that people don't realize, it's not only the veterans that are taking their lives. It also can include spouses and other family members of veterans that are susceptible to suicide. And that's something that isn't reported.
Tammy, there is an organization called Blue Star Family, and there's a really big resistance in the military world. When I say military, I'm talking about DOD. And there's just finally starting to break that code, where they're actually reporting on family members who die by suicide. The challenge, Tammy and Bonni, is that there's nobody doing that in the veterans world, right? Once in the military world, there's all kind of support going on and everything else. But in the veteran world, there's almost no support, unless, the only one that's really providing support for veterans and their families is TAPS. But I want to change that, because, and Bonni and I talked about this. I said that suicide is very, very personal. Very personal. So you cannot nationalize it, you cannot monopolize it, you can't franchise it. It requires the local community to have an impact on the prevention, the intervention, and the postvention. And so you can't, and that's our problem with like the VA. They want to try to scale it. And all these data, when I sit there and here I am, I'm in, I cover Hillsborough and Pasco. I want to know who died of suicide in Hillsborough, or who died in Pinellas, and their families. And there's nobody doing that. There's nobody tracking that. And so the community, and I'm talking about the state representatives and the community and stuff, they need to make sure that we get that as well. The Florida Department of Veterans Affairs or somebody should be collecting that data, so that we can, as a community, can respond.
And Tony, what do you think it is that, we have our, ideas or thoughts. What do you think is the reason that, the data is not tracked, or, the more so the lack of resources as well? I mean, there's a lot of times, as well as I, as a veteran, we either are looking for resources for ourselves, or when someone says, who do I reach out to? And sometimes we're like, and just for our viewers, Tony mentioned DOD. For those who don't know military vernacular, that is Department of Defense. So Tony, yeah, why do you think there is no resources? Like, what is going on?
I think there's a couple reasons why, Bonnie. One is that most people model their support off of the veteran at the VA, right? So when they and then the grants and all that kind of stuff that comes out, and so the VA, once you're gone, they don't need you anymore. So that's one. That every models their support off of the VA, and that's not the place you should model your support when it comes to that, because it's just like in the military, right? Once that sponsor leave the military, that family no longer exists, right? They're not thought about. But the challenge is that the community that are not aware of the resources are lacking, because most people think veteran, you got all kinds of support. So there's also a misinformation. They don't understand that as veterans, we have less support, not more support for the families. But most people think, oh, you're a veteran, you got all kinds of support. You don't need us. We need, you got more stuff than we have. And that's not the case for the families of veterans. And so it's a communication piece, and we got to change our business model. And we got to go out to our legislators, people like you, Bonnie, and all these families, and you got to say, hey, what about us? What about us? But it's going to take a bunch of us, because we're really slow to change. The government is, be it state or whatever, it's very slow to change. So unless you're there as a group, you can't do it individually. Even with me, Veterans Council of Veterans, you need a bunch of us to sit there and go to our legislators and say, hey, what about the families of veterans who are, most of them don't retire. So most of them E4, E5s to get out of the military. So they really can't eat. They don't even get mental health services. Most of them, right? It's got to be service connected, and the family gets none. So who's covering for their needs, right? If I'm a veteran, I have PTSD. Who's taking to who makes sure that the family's getting taken care of as well, right? So you got to have that data. And that's what I'm pushing for, data now about families. I said, hey, I want to know the veterans out there who have families, so we can sit there and see the disparity that the families are not getting the services. Right now, we don't know. Right? We don't know how many families out there are part of a veteran, and I got PTSD, or I got depression or substance abuse, all that thing that you had on your cover, which I love, that beginning thing. All those things that contribute to suicide, not just one thing. There's so many things that contribute to suicide, and I just think that we got, when you go to a veteran community or you go to a civilian community and you say veterans, the only thing they say is VA. Right? That's the only answer, VA, and we got to change that. We got to change that. The only answer is the VA. It's got to be the community, especially for suicide.
What do you say? You bring up a valid point. And, again, those of us who are veterans, can speak to this because we live it. It's something that we live. I remember, if you could speak to this, I remember going in, when I first enlisted, like you, I went in at 17, right out of high school. And, in my head was this thought that I am going to be set for life. And I went in, I remember going in with this jaded view that, everybody in the military is wealthy. Like I had a brother-in-law who was Air Force, and he would trade his car in every 3 years, like get a new car every 3 years. My brain processed, oh my gosh, the military, that's for me, wealthy.
Right.
Plus, there are other reasons, I needed self-esteem, I need some self-building. And I wanted to go to college, so that's how I got my college paid for. But at the same time, I thought, I'm going to be set for life with medical care, and at the time, I don't think I was processing mental health care. Although I found out later on, dealing with some of the things as female vets, had to deal with MST, military sexual trauma, and other mental health issues that I had to deal with. Yes, having those services while I was active was great. It was accessible. Once I got out, and I'm a retiree, how difficult it was and is as even a retiree. And I thought if I took it to the end, if I gave that, 20 years plus, I was fortunate I got to retire a little early, but I figure once I gave it that all, that I would still have all of these services available to me, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
So Tony, what was your view on that? Did you, like, myself and so many others, go in and think, hey, military, everything's provided for me, and even when I get out, only to face reality when it didn't?
Yeah, I got out as an officer, right? And so there's a different amount of preparation than if you're enlisted in your lower ranking. So as an officer, I already have my degree, and I got some skills that I can kind of translate a little bit to, to the civilian world, where most enlisted don't have that. But what I didn't understand was, because when you get out of the military, you don't get your whole pay. You get like 50% or 55%. I didn't know that, it's like lifting weights. You don't know what that really is until the weight's on you. And you say, holy shoot, 50% it's not anything. So you don't even know that the 50%, what it even looks like, until you get out and say, wow, this is 50%. I'm not ready for this. And then you're going through the transition. Again, I keep saying that there's no focus on the families. But it's not just you going through adjustments, but it's your family going through adjustments. And so while you're trying to sit there and try to adjust as a veteran, your family's also struggling of trying to adjust. Now, all of a sudden, all these services that were available for them is gone. And you didn't tell them that or whatever. And then there are people who don't understand you, right? So you can't even go to people who like Bonni and I retired, and that's different by itself, being retired, because only less than 18% of the people in the military actually retire. So the rest of almost 80% don't retire. So you get out of the military and you only get 50%, depending on what that 50% is. Because if you're a lower enlisted, 50% is like maybe $2,000, right, a month. So, and then you don't get all the other stuff you normally get. So I think that's one of the things. And the thing that, in the military, and I hate to get too military oriented, but in the military, we have what we call hard skills and soft skills. The military focuses on hard skills, right? Well, so do the people who are out in the veteran world. They focus on hard skills. They focus on being an entrepreneur. They focus on getting a job, doing your resume. Those are hard skills. The soft skills is the mental adjustment that you got to make. Because there are people who get a job because they didn't mentally make that mental adjustment, they lose a job real fast. Or the family is struggling, whatever, because we didn't take care of the soft skills, which is the family, the mental wellness, and the support that the family needs. They didn't, because they're not, again, especially not retired, you're no longer allowed on base. Unless you got an ID card like Bonni and I have, you can't even get back on base to even go to the PX or whatever. So you're like ostracized, right? Exiled. So we need to sit there, as I said, and I know that one of the reasons why we focus more on the hard skills, because they translate into money, right? If I become a business person, then that means I'm going to pay more taxes as a business or employee or whatever. So we're focused on that. And there's no money when it comes to, the soft skills, the mental wellness, whatever. But they're still just as important, because once the veteran gets out and everybody's trying to go through their own individual adjustments, they're no longer a team. Right now, the wife is a wife, and the kids are kids, and the veteran's a veteran, and they're all separate. But in the military, they all, in one sense or the other, are a team. But once you get out, you're no longer a team, and you're trying to satisfy these stressors individually. And remember, and most time in the military, as Bonni knows again, when you're married, you're not home that much, right? So these everyday things that go on in the family, you don't even know as a veteran, because you expect your spouse to take care of that, whatever. And then once you get out of the military, now all of a sudden, all those things you never thought about before are now part of your calculus when you start trying to look for means to support your family and yourself.
You brought up, and to our viewers, just to make it perfectly clear, it's not, military bashing. I would not trade my military experience for anything in the world. But this is a reality.
Yes.
In that, there's a huge lifestyle difference between when you are donning the uniform every day and going off to do, whatever it is, your MOS or military occupational specialty, your job, whatever your job is in the military, you're doing that every day, and your family's over here. And I remember asking my children, as they were graduating from high school, you intend to go in the military? And their response to me was, we did the military when we were with you. No, no. And you're right, Tony, you bring up, that valid point about, the support that, most veterans have, when we're in, you have 100% of your pay, which, depending upon your rank, was pretty decent. I'm going to say pretty decent. For some of us was decent. At the same time, some of us had the luxury of living on base. Well, living on base, you're not paying rent, you're not paying electric, you're not paying water. You might pay, I think I had a cable bill and a phone bill, and that was it. And I remember my mother coming to visit me after I retired. And, I was going to work, or she would call me on the phone and I was off to work. And she made this comment: "You work more now than you did when you were active duty." And, in that question, or, that statement, caused me to take a step back and think about it for a moment. This is my response back to her as, well, Mother, I did not have a mortgage when I was in the military. And so, Tony, when you're talking about, that family dynamic, going from being a team to a not team, I would say, that team that we are in the military, the function of each person is very different. When you're active duty and you're deploying, because it's like, oh, I expect for you to deploy, So if I'm deploying somewhere, my family always knew, well, okay, she's off doing whatever she's doing. We still had a paycheck. We still had a roof over our head. We still had, there was still food. There were still resources. In the civilian world, sometimes deployment meant unemployment. And, I don't think that, that's not something that is just, like as veterans, we don't have the corner, we haven't cornered the market on that per se, or it's not just applicable to veterans. But with us, deployment, moving away from the family still taken care of. Deployment here might mean, again, as I said before, unemployment. Who's taking care of us now? And, Tony, you hit some nails on the head, that the resources are not always there. And then, of course, lack of resource. What does that mean? Stress, extra stressors. What are those extra stressors turn into? How do we cope with those stressors? And if the stressors are too great, what ends up happening? Either we have a substance abuse issue, or, unfortunately, someone dies by suicide.
Well, and I lived that too with my first husband. My first husband was a Vietnam veteran. He was retired due to his injuries, but years later, after he started having issues from his injuries from being in Vietnam, it took the governor of the state of Florida at that time to get him the help he needed. And and then, I had mentioned, I think it was last week, we were talking about how he was treated when he died. He was killed in a work accident, but even the way that I was treated and they treated him was not how you normally would treat a person. And this was back in 1987. And when he passed, we had, just prior to his passing, we had applied for a VA mortgage loan. It came through 2 months after he died. And I wasn't allowed to use it at all. It just kind of went away. And I was getting health benefits and getting an annuity, but when I married Bobby, all that went away.
Yeah.
And now being a widow again, I can't go back and get that.
Marriage to Bobby nullified.
It nullified, everything. Although I still get my Army Echoes magazine all these years later. But yeah, I remember my husband having to fight to get the help that he needed, and as a veteran with injuries from his service, and he did have stressors and mental health issues from his service, and it it amazed me how difficult they made it for him to get the help he needed.
Tony, what do you think it is that their resources appear, and I mean, this is, whether it's real, or in some people's cases imagined, but why do you think the resources for the military are not there? Is it mental health is not important? Is it, lack of money? Is it lack of understanding? What is it from your perspective? Or what do you think it is from your perspective?
Yeah, and I want to backtrack to what you said, Bonnie, which I totally agree with. I know we're saying we're bashing the military, but we got to expose us, or our families are not going to get the help they need. The military, for me, is excellent. I went from a high school dropout in the military, and now that I get a career, and I made great friends that were very diverse. And I've seen other countries, but also they pay for my education. I got a master's degree, all paid for. So I have nothing but great things to say about the military. So I want everybody to understand that. But to continue to take care of our veterans, I have to expose the gaps, and that is. And so, again, I think I keep saying that I think that we are the government, and I mean the VA and stuff has really muted our voice. They're not our advocates. They're not the ones out there saying, hey. They need resources too. So until you tell them, they're not, because everybody's, I know that people think, oh, we're spoiled or whatever, and and there are people out there who are suffering like the veterans are suffering, and so they're saying, why are you special? And we're trying to get help too, and the money's tight. And I think then with that, I think it really is a responsibility of the federal government to take some of the stress off of the state government and local government when all of them have a lack of resources. And I don't, I just think that if I'm going to invest my money, I would prefer to put more money in helping paying more taxes, helping the families of the veterans, than putting money in for another bridge to nowhere. But I just think that and that's funny because Bonnie, if you see out there in the commercial world, there's most of the messages is for military spouses. We don't understand that military spouses are not the same as veteran spouses. So there's a lot of support for military spouses. But I tell all the women and men who are military spouses, I said, just like, you're eventually not going to be a military spouse. So you may not think it's important now, but I guarantee you're going to see it pretty soon when you become on this side of the tracks and nobody's listening to you. So if you look at, we got to look into the federal and look at the agendas of the VA, the House Veteran Affairs Committee, Service Committee, and look at their agenda and see how much of it is addressing the families of veterans. And I think that again, if you don't, and I think that Bonnie happened because remember way back in the day, and I wasn't back there, but I remember my dad said this all the time. They always said, if the military wanted you to have a spouse, they would have issued one.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
Tony!
really?
That is what do they call that? Throwback Thursdays, throwback to it was the same thing about
wow.
children. If you hit it on the head, if the military wanted you to have a spouse, and that was a saying.
Wow.
Because like we would deploy, and Tony just hit on something. If we had to deploy, I was a single parent the majority of my
Oh yes, family care plan.
I was married, had kids, and then, I got divorced and, now I'm single. So, I used to hear, if the military wanted you to have children, they would have issued them to you, and, I will admit, there were times when I progressed and made rank, that I found myself, thinking, as a military leader in leadership, we're almost, I don't want to say brainwashed, but we had to adopt that mentality. You're either going to deploy or, it's like trade deployment for your family. I don't have a babysitter. You can't call in, it's like, you can't call in sick. You can't, hey, I'm going to work from home today because I don't have daycare. It's like, okay, you can't come to work. How about your AWOL, absent without leave.
Wow.
And Tony, when you're talking about, you're right. Eventually, you're not going to be a military spouse. Even as veterans, when I hear you're spoiled, yes. I mean, I might say, yes, you are correct. I'm spoiled in that one day I decided to sign a piece of paper that said if it was necessary for me to, spill my blood, give my life defending the country, that's what we were willing to do. And, Tony, you are on fire this morning. You are on point. Um, because it is, well, wait a minute. We signed this piece of paper. We said we would, give our life in defense of the country. We're out now. And again, it's not, just us as veterans, but us and our families are out now. And it's like, you're right, we have become, in some instances, invisible. Tony, I agree with you 1,000%, where you say, if you don't talk about it, if you don't expose that needs to be exposed, no one will ever know about it. Us doing this
It's
show.
the same thing for this show.
Right.
And what a lot of people, I think, still don't understand is it's not just the veteran or the enlisted person that serves our country. It's the entire family is serving our country. And the entire family needs to be taken care of.
When I think about, how military members, are invisible, and I mean, some of this may sound, like simplistic. I'm going away next week, which, going to see a granddaughter graduate. And, as I'm doing my tickets, I see on there, it's like, oh, if you are a veteran, you don't have to pay for baggage. Your baggage fee is waived. And the first time I saw this, I was like, oh, wow. That may, seem like, minimal to some people or a lot to others. There's a disclaimer on there. You have to be active duty. Mm-hmm. Only if you're active duty. And I'm like, so Tony and I, who took this to the end, who, retired, and I'm not saying that, retirees, we deserve any more than our non-retiree, cohorts. At the same time, I'm not in anymore because it was my time.
And you still serve.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
we're blue card carrying members.
Well, and it's like we were talking about, one of the big box stores offering discounts to veterans. But it's only if you're a veteran that is alive, and if you are a veteran who served, your family is not allowed those same discounts.
Tony, I want to give you an opportunity. You talked about this event that you have coming up. I want to say it's on May 22nd, is it? If I looked at it right.
Yes. Yes.
And I was like, oh, I'm in Kansas at a graduation that day, so I won't be here in town. But I want to give you an opportunity, Tony, to talk to our viewers about this event because you said at the top of the show. You are probably the only person in the country that's doing something like this. And I think I can co-sign on that and say I believe you are correct. So can you talk to people about what this event is?
Yes, and so this, is another one of those, God told me, hey, get this done. And we've been doing this for 7 years. And I wanted, everybody knows that the end of the month is Memorial Day, and that's when the country takes a pause and they remember the fallen, the fallen people who served our countries, who died in our countries. But when you're a family and your veteran died by suicide, there's still a tremendous stigma. And when you go to a regular Memorial Day ceremony, most people there, they're talking about the child that may have died, or a husband that may have died in action or something like that, and then they ask you, well, how did your child, you feel like, wow, you still feel that stigma. And so I created this event because I wanted it to be a safe space for families, because the whole message for them, the whole support for them, I wanted to create a safe space that they can come, they can sit there and grieve about the loved one they lost, a military person that lost, and they may not have died in combat. They took that wound, like a lot of these wounds we get, but they don't they don't take your life until you afterwards. This is kind of a suicide, the same thing. You may have got the wound over in combat or in the military, but it doesn't actually manifest itself till later on. So it doesn't look like it's a combat related situation. So with this, I said, and I want it to be, I don't want to be anything different than a regular memorial. And so I reached out, and even with here, so I got the mayor of Tampa is going to be there. Mayor Cass is going to be there. The new Tampa councilman, Luis Vieta, who's a big, strong supporter of Veterans Council and veterans. We got a chaplain, Linda Pugsley, who's a Vietnam veteran and a chaplain now. She's going to be speaking. We're going to have at least one parent, maybe two, that's going to kind of tell do that memory piece of their son, or in this case, Murtis Landers, who lost her son Derek. So she's going to tell you kind of what she remembers and all that kind of stuff for the memorial. And then we're going to give everybody, in this case, it'll be a bigger audience. And so even if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on Facebook Live, whatever, you guys got to get my Facebook. I have a Veterans Council Veteran Inc. on Facebook Live. If you like that, I'll be on there. And if you're connecting me on and then there's also, I got an Inc. There's an Inc. page because that group there is just for people who are actually veterans, counseling. It's a very private group. The other one, Veterans Council Veteran Inc., is where everybody can sit there and join in, and you'll see the event. And then so they'll get the testimony. And then what I'm going to do is, in this case, anybody who's out there watching, I'm going to say, hey, do you want to say something about your child? Give you the opportunity to come out and say something about your child that we need to hear, and that message, I'll tell you, not only is it therapeutic for the person saying something, but for the veteran out there who may be thinking about suicide, it's going to let them know too, right? It's going to give them pause. So I thank God giving the opportunity to reach more than the people in that physical space. And then we'll have and the great thing is also, yes, that's it right there. And the great thing is we'll also have because it's very comprehensive. So it's going American Legion's going to give the honor guard. We're going to have a chaplain from the special operations over here, and McDill's going to be giving the benediction and invocation. And we're going to have a wreath. So it's just like a regular memorial. It's just that people there don't have to worry about people saying, how did your son or daughter die, right? So it's that space. It's that space. It's going to be supporting scripture and that kind of stuff. So it's my seventh one that I've done for this, and God has always made sure I had good people, people coming and to attend this. And I don't think, my goal, Tammy and Bonni, is I don't want to be the only one doing this. Right? I don't want to be the only one. I want the other communities out there, wherever it is, to say, you know what? I never thought about that. Let me do the same thing, and we will. I think it'll impact future suicides, but we'll also give the comfort that these families that one of the biggest tragedies when you die by suicide, your survivor, is the why, right? Why? And it's just something that will just stay with you for the rest of your life. And so I don't want it. I don't want more of that. I don't want more. I just found a couple of friends of mine. They just lost their people to suicide just in the last a month. So unfortunately, they're part of the family again, right? That's something you don't want, but they're part of that family where they've lost a veteran to suicide. And I've just picked up 2 already in the last 3 weeks. So please, I'll send it to you. Whoever needs to send it to share it. We only have limited guests at the post because of COVID. So just all you got to do is, just click on that link, and you'll see the whole ceremony, and you'll get a chance to really understand what it means to be a survivor of a veteran that died by suicide.
Tony, we will definitely have all that on the foundation Facebook page, and I think I even have time. I'll get it on the foundation website. So, and Bonni will get me all that contact information so that we can share back and forth and get this information out to you, and maybe partner with you somehow to keep what you're doing going, because it is just so important. And I really appreciate what you're doing for the military side of the same battle that, we're all fighting the same battle. We're just trying to reach out to so many different communities and populations. And you're right, it's our organizations that are on the ground where we live are the ones that are going to make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have, we have our Purple Folder program that I'd like to share with you at some point. Maybe it could be another resource that your organization could have. I'd love to be able to supply some of those to you. But I certainly appreciate, everything you're doing, and especially, on a, being like a regular person, but I was, like I said, I was also for a period of time married to a veteran, and so I lived those struggles too. I lived those struggles.
Didn't we tell you he was amazing?
No, it's so great, and it's so great to, to get the information out, because, again, just like not talking about suicide and trying to get people to be more open to it, sometimes it's hard to find organizations like us, and it's gonna take all of us. It's gonna take all of our organizations together to fight this battle, to fight this epidemic on, with across everything.
There's a lot of truth in the statement that says it takes a village.
Exactly.
And from the veteran side of the house, I was picking up a part from my car last night, and I was engaged in a conversation with a young lady that was behind the counter, and she was, I'm Army, she was Air Force or Navy, one of those other branches. And whenever the two branch, the sister branches get together, it's like I won't hold that against you.
Right.
In what you're saying, when you have the foundation, the Bobby White Foundation, this show, Vets Counseling Veterans, Vets Counseling Vets, everybody on, the boots on the ground, it's another military vernacular, boots on the ground, fighting this fight, and as a, getting awareness out, getting the word out in terms of, what is going on, and the best, if not best practices, at least shining a light on, this problem, because if you sit back and think about it, as different organizations, oftentimes we're off doing our own thing. And, the one takeaway from that discussion that I had, with this young lady last night, we were all, clowning around and, just, picking at each other for, respective branches. And this other, the other woman, that was in the store, she was looking at us like, no, this is how we roll in the military. And I said, but here's the thing, we pick on each other. We joke with each other. It's all in good fun, but you can best believe when the bullets start going down, down range, as we call it, we band together and, we fight this fight together. So Tony, I want to give you, an opportunity, in the last few minutes, of the segment, before we go to our normal housekeeping stuff, for our last 5 minutes of the segment, to share with the audience, any, parting words of wisdom. My brother, when you speak, I am always on the edge of my seat. I can't put my phone, I'm on the phone with you. I can't put the phone down. I think we get in trouble with your wife sometimes.
You tend to do that a lot.
I know, it's something about, my friends with wives, but they know it's just Bonnie. But yeah, we get in trouble with his wife sometimes. But yeah, Tony, if you have, some parting words for, our viewers, in terms of, again, whether it's your organization, the veterans population, mental health, suicide, less, write it out, words of wisdom.
So, yes, and so one thing I also want to highlight, which is very important, because the women are often invisible too. So one of the women veterans actually die by suicide 50% more than non-women veterans. And the major reason why is military sexual trauma. And so I want to make sure that, we think so much about, and it is PTSD, but it's caused by MST. And so we got to make sure we understand that they need our support when it comes to suicide. Oftentimes you don't hear that. All you hear about is assault, but not the after effects when you are assaulted and what happens later. So I want everybody to understand that. That's part of our mission for suicide prevention. And also we also big time advocates for military sexual trauma. We need to be I encourage organizations that are out there, instead of trying doing everything by yourself, include veterans counseling veterans. You know, it's like having a second language, and instead of you trying to sit there and speak broken Spanish, bring somebody on that speaks Spanish fluently. Have that collaboration. So I'm asking people out there who have an organization and want to serve veterans, it's okay to bring us in as a partner or whatever, because that, I think you'll have a lot more success doing that than trying to create your own and it just don't work. So that's one thing I want to encourage everybody out there. Connect with me, and you want one of us or whatever to work together on certain things, let us know, because that's what we're here for, to work together to build that bridge between the civilian understanding and the veteran understanding. We always, the suicide part is always the toughest part of my mission, because it's so spiritually draining. So obviously, when something's so spiritually draining, you need opportunity. You need to have a more depth to your bench. And so I definitely encourage volunteers to contact me. We always need volunteers, and we also always need sponsors, because sometimes you feel like you're out there by yourself trying to. But because I'm taking care of my brothers and sisters, I don't have a choice. Right? I'm going to do it. It's going to happen regardless. But it's going to happen regardless. I'm going to do it one way or the other. If I have to just sign out there, I don't care. But yes, it's like everybody else. So if we're looking for sponsors that can help us out, and volunteers, and we can have a bigger impact in our communities, be it Hillsborough, Pinellas, or whatever. So that's my thing. And don't forget about the families. I will not let you forget about the families. Do not forget about the families of the veterans.
Well, I know every single word that you just said resonated with me with our foundation, because I know how hard it is, and we definitely have a new partner in this with the Bobby White Foundation and your organization, that's for sure, because like you said, it takes a village. It's going to take all of our organizations working together. I definitely believe that. I've believed that from the very beginning of me starting the Bobby White Foundation, and it's hard, it's draining. Suicide is probably one of the toughest things to deal with and battle, and especially if you've gone through it yourself and you're trying to help others. It can be draining, and we cannot do it alone. We can't do it alone. Tony, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your organization with us, and we'll continue to share your organization and your events. And we'll be in touch. We will be working together.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tony does bring up a good point. We are all in need of, resources, and having knowledge of, resources that are out there and available for, whether you are a loss survivor or someone who is struggling with, a mental health issue, vets counseling, and Tony brings up an excellent point in terms of sometimes you need somebody who speaks your language,
Right.
In order to make an impact, as we, are talking through, the books that we review, where, and one of a couple of the authors have said, some people are very well-meaning, but the words don't come out,
Right.
Correctly. It's like, I know what I'm trying to say. However, it might come out differently than what I intended, or I know what I'm saying, but you interpreted it differently. So I think it is important to having somebody, speaking the language, so whether it is vets, counseling vets, whether it's NAMI, whether it is, the suicide hotline, of course, the foundation.
That's why you can't just lean on one resource. We have, and that's what we're doing at the foundation too, is continually working to gather more resources for individuals and for families, and I love that. That's what he's doing with his suicide portion. It is the family. It's families, friends, kids, parents, wives, people left behind. Those are lost survivors, and lost survivors are at a greater risk for suicide than the general public. And there's where our part of our prevention goes into also. We have to be there for them, and we have to, like he said, he just has to do it, and that's the way I felt after losing my husband.
What did Tony say? I'm not going to let you forget about the families.
Exactly.
I am not going to let you forget about the families.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, that is one of the, if nothing else resonates, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm even going to focus on, I'm not going to let you forget, you know, because this is an important topic. It is, you know, as difficult for some people as it may be, you know, when you have organizations out there doing, you know, willing to put the boots on the ground and do the hard part.
And it is, and that's why we're here, so that it'll get easier in time, and in time, maybe we won't have to be doing it so much.
Exactly.
You know, so again, we want to thank Tony from Vets Counseling Vets for being our guest. It was super. I'm just so glad that we had this show. So again, we want to thank Greg Schindler State Farm for their donation. And remember, we have our T-shirts available. You purchase things on Amazon, choose the foundation as your charity of choice. And always remember, there's always hope.